They say the most dangerous decisions start with the smallest choices. For me, it began with a simple yes. When my husband James asked if his son could stay with us for the summer. I was 35, living in a beautiful colonial house in suburban Boston. Married to one of the city's most successful tech executives. Leading what everyone called a charmed life. If they only knew. The loneliness of empty rooms and cold dinners. The silence of a house too big for one person. The endless charity events and country club luncheons. All to maintain the perfect image. I used to be somebody. Had my own career as an art gallery curator in New York. But that was before I met James Mitchell. Before I fell for his charm and stability. Before I became the trophy wife. Young enough to turn heads. Old enough to know better. When Ryan arrived that June morning, I wasn't prepared. 3 years had passed since I'd last seen him. The awkward college freshman had become something else entirely. Tall, athletic, with his father's sharp jawline. But softer somehow. More present. "Emma," he said, dropping his bags in the foyer. Just my name, but something in his tone made me pause. "The room's ready upstairs," I replied, too quickly. Trying to ignore how his t-shirt clung to his shoulders. How his eyes lingered a moment too long. James was already gone, of course. Emergency board meeting in Singapore. "I'll be back in a month," he promised. The same promise he always made. The same one he never quite kept. The first week with Ryan was careful. Polite conversations over breakfast. Brief encounters in hallways. Each of us orbiting the other. Until the night of the storm. Thunder rattling windows. Lightning illuminating empty rooms. I found him in the kitchen at midnight. Making hot chocolate like he used to as a kid. "Can't sleep?" he asked, offering me a mug. I took it, our fingers brushing. Electricity that had nothing to do with the storm. We talked for hours that night. About his dreams of becoming a writer. My abandoned art career. The weight of his father's expectations. The emptiness of my perfect life. Something shifted between us. Subtle at first. A new awareness. A dangerous possibility. I started taking more care with my appearance. Wearing the sundresses that had hung unworn. Adding extra time to my morning workout. Telling myself it wasn't for him. Knowing I was lying. Ryan noticed. I caught his glances when he thought I wasn't looking. Felt the tension rise whenever we were alone. The house seemed to shrink. Every room charged with unspoken words. We started watching movies in the evening. Netflix playing while summer rain fell outside. Sitting closer each night. Until our shoulders touched. Until the air between us felt electric. I knew we were playing with fire. Knew I should stop it. But I couldn't. Or wouldn't. The breaking point came during a heat wave. Air condicio. Ning struggling against July humidity. I was in the pool, trying to cool off. When Ryan came outside. Shirtless and beautiful in the afternoon sun. "Mind if I join?" he asked. But his eyes said something else entirely. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Watched him dive in. Water droplets catching light on his skin. We swam laps in silence. Each turn bringing us closer. Until we were treading water in the deep end. Face to face. Hearts racing. "Emma," he whispered. Just my name again. But this time everything was different. I knew I should swim away. return to the safety of the shallow end. But I stayed, watching his eyes darken, feeling the water move between us. "We can't," I said softly. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. His hand found my waist underwater, pulling me closer, until I could feel his breath on my lips. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I should have. Everything in me knew I should. Instead, I kissed him. The world disappeared, replaced by the taste of chlorine and desire, by the feel of his hands on my skin, by the sound of my heart breaking all my rules. We broke apart, breathing hard, reality crashing back like a wave. "Oh God," I whispered, pushing away from him, swimming to the ladder, running inside, leaving wet footprints on expensive floors. I locked myself in my bedroom, tried to calm my racing heart, tried to forget the feel of his lips, tried to remember who I was supposed to be. James's wife, Ryan's stepmother, a respectable woman who didn't kiss college students, who didn't betray her husband, who didn't want things she couldn't have. But that night, lying alone in my king-sized bed, all I could think about was Ryan. His touch, his taste, his eyes when he looked at me. Sleep didn't come. Neither did peace. The next morning, I avoided the kitchen. Couldn't face him over coffee. Couldn't trust myself. But the house conspired against us. Every room a reminder. Every corner a possibility. I found him in the library that afternoon, pretending to read, looking up when I entered. "We need to talk," he said. Standing, moving closer. "About yesterday," I started. But words failed me. Because he was there. So close. Looking at me like I was everything. "It was a mistake," I tried again. "Was it?" he asked, taking another step, until I could feel his heat. "You know it was," I whispered. But my body betrayed me. Leaning toward him, like a flower seeking sun. His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. "Then why does it feel so right?" I closed my eyes, fighting the pull, losing. When his lips found mine again, it wasn't like the pool. This was slower, deeper, more dangerous. Because this time we knew exactly what we were doing. His hands tangled in my hair. Mine gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer, until there was no space between us. Until I couldn't remember why this was wrong. Until nothing existed but tea. His. The taste of him. The feel of his heart racing against mine. The sound of books falling as we stumbled against shelves. Reality crashed back with the thud of leather bindings. I pushed him away, hand covering my mouth. "We can't," I gasped. "This has to stop." But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. We'd crossed a line. Started something we couldn't control. Something that would either save us or destroy us all. I fled the library, leaving him standing among fallen books, leaving my heart behind. But I could still feel his touch, still taste him on my lips, still hear his words echoing. Why does it feel so right? Because it did. God help me, it did. And that terrified me more than anything. The next few days were torture. Every moment a battle. Between what I wanted and what I knew was right. I threw myself into charity work, planning galas I didn't care about, attending lunches with women I barely knew. Anything to stay away from the house, away from him. But nights were the worst. Lying awake, listening for his footsteps in the hall, wanting him to knock, praying he wouldn't. James called from Singapore, talking about contracts and meetings, not noticing my distracted responses, not hearing the guilt in my voice. "I miss you," he said before hanging up. I couldn't say it back. The lie stuck in my throat. Because I didn't miss him. Hadn't for a long time. And that truth changed everything. The summer heat grew more intense. Along with everything else. Ryan and I circled each other like planets. Pulled by gravity we couldn't escape. Every shared glance a spark. Every accidental touch a flame. We tried to maintain distance. But the house felt smaller each day. And our resolve weaker. I started wearing his favorite perfume. The one that made his eyes darken. Started leaving my hair down. The way he liked it. Telling myself it wasn't for him. Another lie to add to the collection. One evening, a thunderstorm knocked out the power, plunging the house into darkness. I found candles in the kitchen, trying to ignore how the shadows danced. How intimate everything felt. Ryan appeared in the doorway, lightning illuminating his silhouette. "Need help?" he asked. But his eyes said something else. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We moved around each other, like a dance we practiced, until he was behind me, close enough to feel his heat. "Emma," he whispered. And I was lost. His hands found my waist, turning me to face him. The candle flickered between us, casting shadows on his beautiful face. "We shouldn't," I breathed. But my hands were already in his hair. His lips already finding mine. The candle forgotten. Everything forgotten. Except this. This hunger. This need. This perfect, terrible moment. He lifted me onto the counter, standing between my legs, kissing me like he was drowning. And I was air. My dress rode up. His hands on my thighs, setting my skin on fire. "Want you," he murmured. Against my neck. Against my collarbone. Against my heart. "Here?" I gasped, as his fingers traced patterns. Higher. Higher. "Here," he confirmed. And I couldn't say no. Didn't want to say no. The kitchen counter, where I'd made countless family dinners, became something else entirely. An altar to our sin. A testament to our weakness. When it was over, we stood in the darkness, breathing hard, reality seeping back. "Oh God," I whispered, straightening my dress, hands shaking. "What have we done?" But we both knew. We'd crossed the final line, burned the last bridge. There was no going back now. The next morning brought guilt, and shame, and a desperate need to see him again. I found him by the pool, looking as lost as I felt. "We need to talk," I said, sitting beside him, our feet dangling in the water. "About last night," he started. But I cut him off. "About everything." Because it wasn't just last night. It was every moment since he'd arrived. Every look. every touch, every forbidden desire. This is wrong, I said. We're destroying everything. He looked at me then, eyes full of something that broke my heart. Do you want to stop? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility and consequence. No, I whispered. The truth finally spoken. God help me, I don't. He took my hand, squeezed it gently. Then don't fight it anymore. And I didn't. Couldn't. We became more careful after that. But also more bold. Stolen kisses in darkened rooms. Long afternoons in his bed. While the world spun on outside. I learned every inch of him. The scar on his shoulder from baseball. The freckles on his back. The way he said my name when we were alone. Like a prayer. Like a sin. Like everything. James called less frequently. Too busy with his empire. Too distant to notice that his wife had changed. That his son had changed. That everything had changed. The country club ladies whispered about my new glow. My different smile. You seem happier, they said. Not knowing why. Not knowing how. Not knowing about the guilt that ate at me at night. When I was alone with my thoughts. With my choices. With my sins. Ryan's college girlfriend called one day. Wanting to visit. My heart stopped. Started. Stopped again. Tell her no, I said. Hating the desperation in my voice. Hating my jealousy. Hating how much I needed him. He did. Made excuses. Chose me. Again and again. But we both knew. This couldn't last. Reality was waiting. Like a storm on the horizon. One evening, James called. Coming home next week, he said. For good this time. The words fell like bombs. Destroying our perfect bubble. Shattering our illusion. I found Ryan in the library. Where it had all started. He's coming back, I said. The words tasting like ashes. He pulled me close. Held me tight. As if E could keep me there. Keep this. Keep us. We'll figure it out, he whispered. But we both knew. There was nothing to figure out. No happy ending possible. Not for this story. That night, we loved each other desperately. Like it was the last time. Because maybe it was. Had to be. Should be. His hands memorized my body. My lips traced his skin. Trying to burn this moment. Into memory. Into soul. I love you, he whispered. In the darkness. And I broke. Because I loved him too. God help me, I did. But love wasn't enough. Not for this. Not for us. Morning came too soon. Bringing reality with it. Like a tide we couldn't stop. Couldn't escape. Couldn't survive. James came home on a Tuesday. Bringing London rain and expensive gifts. Acting like nothing had changed. While everything had. I played my part. The devoted wife. While my heart lived in another room. With his son. The house felt different now. Every corner held memories. Of stolen kisses. Of whispered promises. Of love we couldn't have. Ryan and I maintained distance. Careful not to look too long. not to stand too close. But the tension remained. Electric and dangerous. James noticed something. Small changes in his perfect world. The way I flinched from his touch. The way Ryan avoided family dinners. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night. And I almost told him. Almost confessed everything. But couldn't form the words. Couldn't destroy his world. Even though we already had. The country club whispers grew louder. Someone had seen something. A touch that lingered too long. A look that revealed too much. The rumors spread like wildfire. I could feel them watching. Judging. Wondering. While our carefully built facade began to crack. Ryan started staying out late. Avoiding the house. Avoiding me. Avoiding the truth of what we'd done. But when our eyes met across rooms, everything rushed back. Every touch. Every kiss. Every moment we'd stolen. One night, James had to work late. The house empty except for us. Ryan found me in the kitchen. Where it had all started. "I can't do this," he said. Voice breaking. "Can't pretend anymore." I reached for him without thinking. Muscle memory. Heart memory. "We have to," I whispered. But he was already pulling me close. One last time. One last kiss. One last moment. Before everything fell apart. We didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear the footsteps. Until it was too late. "What the hell is this?" James's voice. Cold as ice. We jumped apart. But the damage was done. The truth exposed. In that frozen moment. Everything shattered. James's face turned to stone. Eyes moving between us. His wife. His son. His perfect family. Destroyed. "How long?" he asked. Voice deadly quiet. Neither of us answered. But our silence said everything. "Get out," he said to Ryan. "Both of you get out." I started to speak. To explain. To beg forgiven. But there were no words. For what we'd done. For what we'd broken. Ryan packed quickly. While I stood in our bedroom. Looking at the life I'd built. The lies I'd lived. James wouldn't look at me. Wouldn't speak to me. The silence worse than anger. Worse than hate. I left that night. With nothing but a suitcase. And the weight of my choices. Heavy on my heart. The media had a field day. Tech executive's wife runs off with stepson. Headlines screaming our shame. Across every platform. I checked into a hotel. While my world burned. While my phone exploded. With messages I couldn't face. Ryan found me there. Looking lost and young. And so beautiful it hurt. "What do we do now?" he asked. And I had no answer. Because how do you build something new? From the ashes of what you've destroyed? Days passed in a blur. Lawyers called. Papers were signed. My perfect life dismantled. Piece by piece. The divorce was quiet. James's money buying silence. But everyone knew. Everyone whispered. Everyone judged. Ryan and I tried to make it work. In a small apartment in the city. Away from prying eyes. Away from our past. But the weight of what we'd done hung between us. In quiet moments, In dark nights, when guilt crept in, months passed, seasons changed, life moved on. But we couldn't. Not really. The cost had been too high, the damage too deep. "I love you," he said one night. "But this isn't enough, is it?" And I knew he was right. Love wasn't enough to erase the past, to heal what we'd broken, to make this right. We parted on a Sunday, as summer turned to fall. No dramatic goodbye, just quiet acceptance that some loves, no matter how real, no matter how deep, are not meant to last. I moved to New York, started over, found my way back to art, to myself. Sometimes I think about that summer, about stolen moments and forbidden love, about choices and consequences, about the fine line between desire and destruction. They say the most dangerous decisions start with the smallest choices. For me, it began with a simple yes and ended with goodbye. But I learned something about love, about loss, about the price we pay for following our hearts, even when we shouldn't, even when we can't, even when we must. End.